students, welcome back. In this session, we are going to start with the other sources of energy, meaning the renewable sources of energy. And inside renewable energy sources, the most important one for us is solar energy. Then we have wind energy, that is important. You have geothermal energy. And then finally you have bioenergy, which comes from biofuels. So these are the 4 types of energy that we'll be looking after here. Now the first thing is, when you talk about non-renewable sources of energy and renewable sources of energy, renewable sources of energy are supposed to be the future. Whether it is wind energy or solar energy, we need to build capacity in a way that we are able to handle our future. And that is not the case that has happened until now. Solar energy and wind energy, although, are the ones which you'll see have immense potential. And over last 2-3 years or 4 years, the development that we have seen in our country is very, very high. But before that, there was nothing that was happening. And that's why we are still in the nascent stages of building these energy sources. As a matter of fact, the government of India has set a target of getting an installation capacity of 175 gigawatt of power by 2022. And in this 175 gigawatt of power, 100 gigawatt of power has to come from solar energy and 60 gigawatt power has to come from wind energy. So that's why you see these are going to be the most important power sources for us, because we are trying to build an energy capacity which is the most for these 2 energy sources. Apart from that, when it comes to geothermal energy, presently we are not doing much in case of geothermal energy, but we have a target that by 2030 we should be able to generate 10 gigawatt of power from geothermal energy sources. Right now we are doing nothing at commercial scale, next to nothing at commercial scale, but by 2030 we have this ambitious program or target in mind. So that's why you will see that when it comes to solar energy, the amount of things that is happening in India is the highest. For example, International Solar Alliance, a very, very important topic for you in the examination. Apart from that, Surya Mitra app development or Surya Mitra skill development program and Surya Mitra app. Those 2 are also associated with this. Then you might have seen that CSIR has built a new kind of solar power panel which have a vertical alignment instead of having a horizontal alignment. So that again becomes another new development that we are looking at this. Then of course you have National Solar Mission, which is taking care of all the needs that are required with respect to building the capacity of solar energy. So all this has been happening in solar energy. Now when it comes to solar energy, the very first thing that we need to understand is what is solar energy. How do I define solar energy? So solar energy is nothing but the energy that is obtained from the sun. It has become the world's fastest growing source of power. The daily average radiation is around 5 kilowatt hour per meter square per day, with sunshine hours ranging between 2300 to 3200 per year. India receives solar energy equivalent to more than 5000 trillion kilowatt hour per year, which is far more than its total annual energy consumption. Solar heat and light can both be harnessed as energy, former as solar thermal and latter as solar photovoltaic. Now see, if you look at the amount of radiation that we keep getting every day or every hour, that is more than enough, or you can say far more than what we actually need for the power production of the entire country, whether it's a domestic level or at industrial level. But just think about this factor. Amount of solar radiation is one thing, but generating or capturing that power is another. You cannot just have a solar panel all throughout the country. You can just have it at certain places only. Apart from that, much of solar radiation is also lost to the atmosphere. Much of it is going to the plants, which is being used for photosynthesis by them. Much of it is coming to the ground, which is heating up the ground and forms another kind of energy there. So with that, the tapping of solar energy is not as high as you would think or as high as it is possible for us to do. But nevertheless, solar energy is still being used for two main purposes, one as a heat source and one as a light source. So that's why we are talking about solar thermal energy and solar photovoltaic. These are the two ways in which solar energy is being used. For example, talk about solar water heaters. So what would solar water heaters do? They would concentrate all the solar radiation, all the photons that is incident in a given area to a given solar water heater or a solar powered tank, where the water would be heated and then it would be provided to the areas which are nearby. So in that way, solar energy is being captured as heat energy. The second way is to capture it as light energy or solar photovoltaics. So for that, you need something called as solar cells. And these solar cells will make something called as solar panels. So what is a solar panel? Solar panel basically are the devices that are used to convert the solar energy into electricity. Solar panel comprises of several individual cells that are made of semiconductors such as silicon. When the light strikes silicon semiconductor, it causes the electrons to flow and thereby produce electricity. So this flow basically happens in a particular direction, and this will finally produce electricity. So if you look at the working of solar panel, first of all, the solar sunlight photons would be incident on the solar panel. This solar panel is nothing but a network of small solar cells which contains silicon, which is a kind of semiconductor. So here the electrons inside the silicon solar panel will start to align themselves and then start to give you a kind of electricity which is called as direct current. From here there will be a production of direct current. But what happens is direct current, and there is another form called as alternating current. So when it comes to direct current is something that can be used to store energy. Talk about your batteries, battery of a cell phone, battery of a laptop. All these actually have direct current, stored electricity which can be used later. But for a household purpose, direct current is not used. Instead, we use something called as alternating current. So that's why this direct current has to be converted into alternating current. And this function will be carried out by something called as an inverter. So inverter will convert all the direct current into alternating current, and then that alternating current can be used for the generation of power. It will be sent to the grid, or it can be used for household purpose for providing the electricity. So this is how the entire working will go about. Now, one last thing that we need to talk about when it comes to solar energy are what are the advantages and disadvantages of solar energy. So the very first thing is, when you talk of the advantages, first of course is the fact that it is a renewable source of energy which is environmental friendly. Renewable source of energy, of course, because as we discussed in the beginning of this unit, that a source of energy which can exist or sustain for as long as the earth exists, or as long as the relation between earth and sun exists, can be called as a renewable source. And that is why, since as long as the earth exists, sun exists, you will have the solar power, and that's why it becomes a renewable source. An environmentally friendly source, because there is no carbon dioxide or sulfur dioxide etc. given out by the solar panels. Then wide availability, right? Because when you talk about fossil fuel is very restricted in the ways or in the areas in which it will be formed. But when it comes to solar energy is freely available all throughout. So that's why you talk about wide availability. Then again, being versatile, because it can be used both as heat and it can be used for production of electricity as well, that is in the form of light. So that's why you call it versatile. Then low noise. Why low noise? Because let's say if you compare solar energy to something like wind energy. Now wind energy will need the wind turbines to rotate all the time, and rotation of these wind turbines will produce some noise, and for the people who live in the vicinity of those areas, it's not ideal for them to have a constant source of noise. So if you compare to that, solar energy is a low noise source. Then again, the amount of maintenance that you need to do in solar energy panels is very less. Once the installation has been done, it will keep running for more than 2-3 years without any issue, and that's why you have a low maintenance here. Then it becomes a remote and portable power option. How? Talk about solar energy. Sun's energy is present everywhere. So if you can introduce an electric generator at a given area which is remotely situated, you would be able to provide electricity to these areas. You need not carry the high tension lines or provide the power grid to the entire area from a very far off place, and in that manner reduce the efficiency of the entire system. Instead, use solar energy, and use solar energy for the production of electricity. So that's why it becomes a remote and portable power option. Then the return on investment, and why we are talking about return on investment is the fact that the initial cost is high. So that is the reason why we talk about return on investment, that although the initial investment will be high, but over a period of time all that will be made up and you would have a good return on investment. And then apart from that, increased energy security. Think about a fossil fuel. Take the case of India. We are highly dependent on Middle East countries and US to get the petroleum products, because our petroleum generation is not high enough to sustain the power requirements of the country. So if we do not have good relations with these countries, what can happen is that we might lose out on these kind of energy sources, or we might lose out on the prices at which we are getting all these fuel resources. So all these problems may arise if we do not have good relations. So that's why, to increase the energy security, we need a fuel like solar energy, where you are not dependent on a third country or a second country for the generation of power in your own country. Amount of solar radiation that is available onto the surface of the earth, especially in India, India being in the tropics, partially India lies up to Tropic of Cancer. So that's why in that case the amount of solar radiation that is incident on the surface of India is also very high. So that's why we increase energy security if we start using solar energy in a much more efficient manner. And then finally, it is an evolving technology, in a way that the solar panels that are being used, the entire grid that is being used, all the components and materials that are being used, they are evolving over time. They did not have as much efficiency as they have today 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So the efficiency is increasing, the amount of incoming radiation that can be captured, that is increasing. So with all that, what happens is it actually becomes an evolving technology, because there are new advancements which are happening every day in the field of solar energy. So all these become advantages for you when it comes to solar energy. Then we have certain disadvantages also. And what these disadvantages are, first of all, it is expensive. But this is something that is taken care of. And that's why we talk about return on investment. Because the return on investment for solar energy is very high. It has a low maintenance, so over a period of time, this expense, or you can say the expense of initial installation, will be taken care of. Then these two become very difficult problems when it comes to solar energy. First of all, daylight only solution. Of course, you cannot produce electricity through solar energy at night, because for solar energy you need the sun, and there is no sun at night. So that's why this becomes a huge hindrance in the amount of production of electricity that you can do from solar energy. Then apart from that, it is vulnerable to atmospheric conditions. Think about a cloudy weather, or think about a foggy weather. These situations can lead to lesser amount of solar radiation being incident on the earth, and that's why the amount of production of electricity that can happen, that will also reduce. So in that way, this is not a very good option if you consider these factors. These are very huge disadvantages that solar energy has. Even if you consider the smog situation that we were talking about for North India. Once you have the smog, once you have air pollution will also reduce the amount of solar radiation onto the surface of the earth. And then again you are decreasing the efficiency of any given system. So that's why even though we talk about installation capacity of a given country, installation capacity does not mean that as much amount of electricity production will also happen. So for example, we have a target of installation capacity of 100 gigawatt power by 2022 under National Solar Mission. Now, it does not mean that we will start producing 100 gigawatt of power. It can be much lesser than that. But our installation capacity should be of 100 gigawatt of power, so that if we have efficient systems, we should be able to generate as much as power we want. Then apart from that, another disadvantage associated with this is large footprint. And what we mean by large footprint is that it requires large amount of land. The land requirement for solar energy is high because you need to set up the entire solar panels on the ground. Compare this to wind energy. Wind energy does not take up any part of the ground. You just need to have a vertical arrangement where the production of electricity actually is happening in the air 50 meters or 60 meters above the ground. So in that case, again, it does not have a large footprint. So an advantage that wind energy has over solar energy. And then finally, manufacturing pollution. And this basically we are discussing the solar panels. What happens is, in the manufacturing of solar panels, there are certain chemicals that are released, poisonous chemicals such as silicon tetrachloride, which can become a cause of pollution. So there can be pollution causes. For example, hydrofluoric acid can be produced during the manufacturing of solar panels. So all these actually make a contribution to the manufacturing pollution. But even though, if you consider these kind of pollution also, compared to fossil fuel is nothing. Compared to fossil fuels, this is negligible amount of pollution that is produced, but still there is a manufacturing pollution that is associated with solar energy or production of solar panels. So that is where we have to work, that even this needs to become cleaner than it already is. So all these things are associated with the disadvantage of solar energy.